Joining me now on set is Danya Perry, former Assistant United States Attorney in the Southern District of New York, and Hugo Lowell, congressional reporter for The Guardian. Both of you, thanks for being here. Hugo, I'm going to start with you. High level, what stood out to you about this new filing from the DOJ last night?
The thing that really stood out, I think, is the obstruction. You know, we've been hearing for weeks now about the classified documents and the degree to which kind of sensitive government secrets were being stashed at Mar-a-Lago. But I think the DOJ really put an emphasis in that filing yesterday night on the potential obstruction. And of course, reading between the lines, we now see that at least two Trump lawyers might themselves be facing some legal peril here with the obstruction side of the investigation. Evan Corcoran and Christina Bobb. Bobb, of course, signed the certification to the Justice Department that all documents responsive to the subpoena had been turned over. And then it turned out, of course, that that wasn't the case. So I think that element was particularly a significant moment.
Danya, I have to ask you, we're both former prosecutors, private practitioners, as you are doing now. It is wild to think about the possible exposure to the lawyers in this case. Bad actors all the time, right, when it comes to people like Donald Trump. But when you have the lawyers involved, let's talk a little bit about why they should be worried.
I mean, there is a pattern here. There's a history of the lawyers who Donald Trump surrounds himself with themselves getting into trouble. And here we have somebody lied to the FBI. It's either his lawyers or Trump. I think that's pretty clear from the filing last night.
Or they all could,
or
right?
Both. That is exactly right. So, you know, we'll see who throws who under the bus, but somebody's going to go down for these statements that there was a diligent search, that the lawyers scoured the premises. Either, you know, they did that and they didn't find these documents because, you know, as is hinted at in these papers, they were moved, or, you know, they didn't do it and simply lied to the FBI and DOJ. So, you know, it's been rumored that he's had a hard time finding lawyers for this, and it's really no wonder, given the history that we've seen here with Trump throwing his own lawyers into harm's way.
So, before I go to Hugo, though, let's follow this, though, a little bit more. Let's say I'm Donald Trump's lawyer. I'm the person who signed that certification saying that there are no more classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. I make that affirmative representation as a member of the bar. Would I just try to save myself by saying, but my client told me that. I relied reasonably on what Donald Trump told me, so I don't have any type of culpability or exposure here?
That would be a defense, maybe not a plausible one, but that's the only defense that they might have. They also would have to, if they're the same lawyers that are on this case, would have to withdraw from the case,
there you go.
Which in and of itself would be a tell. So they couldn't say why they're withdrawing, but clearly there would be a conflict of interest here, and they should, in fact, withdraw from the case.
Yeah, so Hugo, Trump can't shut up. He's constantly posting on Trump Social. It's really absurd, frankly, the number of times that he's posting on Trump Social. But since last night's filing, he has reacted by saying, quote, I declassified. I mean, sounds like an admission to me. What's your reaction to the continuing statements and, frankly, admissions that are coming out of Donald Trump on places like Truth Social, which, by the way, can be used against him in the event that he's prosecuted?
It's fascinating that he keeps talking about that he's declassified these documents when we already know that the classification really has no bearing on the statutes listed in the search warrant. But additionally, the thing that came up yesterday in the filing was the subpoena, the May subpoena that the Justice Department issued to the custodian of records representing Donald Trump. And that was, of course, Christina Bobb. And in that subpoena, it listed a whole bunch of classified documents, a whole bunch of markings and classifications, but it basically said we want all of the presidential records and all of the materials taken to the White House after the end of the administration. It didn't really mention the classification, so even if it were true that he had declassified these documents, it really wouldn't make any difference to his case.
Well, and the filing makes it very clear, Hugo, right, that Trump and his lawyers never said that they were declassified. Trump and his lawyers never used an executive privilege argument. I mean, this has been a slow-moving process that's been going on for months. And so, Danya, you know, we do filings all the time in court as lawyers. Start strong, end strong. This entire filing was pretty strong, in my opinion. But they talk at the beginning of this filing about standing. The fact that Donald Trump doesn't have standing to even ask for the appointment of a special master, because these records belong to the government. They never belong to him. So procedurally, do you think that's enough for Judge Cannon tomorrow at that hearing at 1 o'clock to say, here's an easy way out for me. Donald Trump, you don't have standing. Bye. You're not going to get your special master.
That should be the judge's first question to Trump's lawyer. Do you agree that there's no possessory interest, that there's no standing? And if not, why not? It's really telling that they omitted any reference to the Presidential Records Act, any reference to the case law, to the fact that these simply are not the president's records. They do not belong to him, whatever he thinks. By law, by statute, they belong to the government. And they don't even address that. Usually you try and draw the sting. You anticipate the argument and you try and refute it. Maybe they weren't aware. I don't know. There were a couple offshoots to that argument that DOJ made, including that there's no executive privilege within the executive branch. It's trumped in any event by a criminal investigation. There are a whole bunch of other arguments, but that one standing alone, I agree. It appears open and shut, and it really should be a gating question.
And to the issue that I was talking about with Hugo, even if Trump had attempted to declassify, and I say attempt because we don't know if he ever successfully did it, isn't the mere fact that he had these records in his possession from the beginning evidence of his guilt?
In some ways, this is like a narcotics case. This is, if you have it in your possession, yes, you can argue, I didn't realize that white powdery substance was cocaine. But that's a difficult argument. I've never seen that argument succeed. So, we saw some tells in the filing. Some of the documents, as you pointed out earlier, were in his office, in his desk, and they were intermingled with his personal documents and his passports. So that's another tell that he had to know. And if he saw them, if he put eyes on them and they're in his residence, I do agree that's an open and shut case.
Yeah, so Hugo, to what Danya's talking about, the government saying it took, for example, Trump's passports because they were found in the desk drawer along with classified documents. The filing from the DOJ states, quote, the government seized the contents of a desk drawer that contained classified documents and governmental records commingled with other documents, which included 2 official passports. The location of the passports is relevant evidence. And Hugo, the filing also talks about the fact they're not going to give back some of these personal effects of Donald Trump because it's relevant evidence to the guilt in this case. Why is it so important for the DOJ to make this assertion?
Yeah, that last line in that excerpt there about the location pertaining to the evidence, I think that's really important. Look, this whole case hinges on what did Trump know, what was his intent with these documents. And if you talk to people close to former president, people who have worked in Mar-a-Lago, Trump is a very secretive person. He's very distrusting of a lot of the people around him. The idea that any aide could get into his desk and, place his passports there along other documents is just laughable. And so when you learn through the filing that his passports were there next to these classified documents, this whole claim that Trump didn't really know that he was in possession of classified documents or other sensitive government materials kind of evaporates. And I think that's a really significant point that the Justice Department picked up on.
Danya, I want to go back a little bit to flip the switch a little bit on this. If I was saying to you earlier, I'm Trump's lawyer, I say I relied upon what Donald Trump told me. Donald Trump critically never has pieces of paper, right? Doesn't send emails, notoriously doesn't have that paper trail. But in this instance, we know from the redacted search warrant, or the affidavit, excuse me, that's been partially unredacted, his handwriting was found on some of these documents. And the fact that they're now found in his residence, in his room, in his office, can Trump then say, well, I relied upon what my lawyers were telling me to do, or I relied upon what my lawyers were making representations about whether or not these classified documents had been returned or still at Mar-a-Lago, et cetera?
Look, that's an argument that he's made in the past. He often says, I surround myself with the best lawyers, with the best advisors, the best accountants. I let them do what they will do. That's not going to work in this case because he, as you said before, I think it's really critical. He's essentially made an admission. He's boxed himself in. The best argument he probably could have made was, I didn't know they were there. And as Hugo pointed out, that would be a tough argument for him to make in light of his secrecy and in light of, where they were found and all that. But that's at least a plausible defense. But now he's gone and blown that possible defense with some of these other, fake defenses he's thrown out there, including that he declassified them. So he can't have it all, and he can't then say, I relied on my lawyer, because the subpoena was very clear, for example. It said, provide anything that has a classification mark on it. And that was not done. So whether he declassified or didn't, whether he relied on lawyers or not, those documents were still found in his desk, and they are marked classified. And that's why I compare it to a drug case. It's either there or not, and your criminal intent matters less in this case uniquely than it does in a lot of other espionage cases.
So, Hugo, tell us a little bit about what you're hearing about what's happening down in Trump world in Mar-a-Lago, in that area. There's got to be some last-minute panicking going on. 8 o'clock tonight is the deadline that Judge Cannon has imposed on Trump to file a reply to the Department of Justice's response. But wasn't it just yesterday, Hugo, that there was a big marquee banner news that Trump had picked up former Florida Solicitor General Chris Kise to join his legal team? I mean, are we going to be expecting to see something that has Chris Kise's name on it by tonight?
That's not the indication I'm getting right now. I caught up with a couple of people close to the Trump legal team earlier today, and the indication at the moment is that 3 lawyers who were originally on the filing will be in Florida tomorrow, and that's supposed to be Jim Trusty, Evan Corcoran, and Lindsay Halligan. And I'm also hearing that probably 2 out of the 3 will make it to the courthouse tomorrow. It's not expected that all 3 will show up, although, again, anything is possible. But that's the team there in Florida. It's being led by Jim Trusty and Evan Corcoran, and Lindsay Halligan's going to be the local lawyer there who doesn't have to be admitted pro-hack, VJ.
Now I'm intrigued. Now I'm intrigued that I don't hear Chris Kise to show up tomorrow at this critical hearing for the special master. And Lindsay Halligan, she seems to be making an appearance tomorrow, but of course, noticeably, conspicuously absent is Christina Bobb from a lot of this. I'm actually surprised Evan Corcoran's going to be there. Danya Perry, Hugo Lewell, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.